What was your purpose in getting the guns?
Uh, I will, I assume we'll get to the night of August 20th, and
Yep.
we'll,
We're
okay.
about there.
Okay. Uh, My purpose in getting the guns was to protect myself in case my father or my mother came at me to kill me, or my father came in the room to rape me. That is why I bought the guns.
Okay. And how many guns were purchased?
2.
Why was that?
One for me and one for Lyle.
So Lyle, you believe, was going to assist you or was going to help you in some way if you were attacked?
Yes, but he telling Lyle and exposing the family secret, and my dad believing that we were going to go and tell other people, meant that our lives were in extreme danger immediately. So Lyle did not feel comfortable. If I wasn't leaving, he wanted to have a gun.
Okay, so why use fake ID to get those guns?
That was the idea I had on me. I didn't have an ID, and 2, even if I had an ID, I wouldn't have used it. I wouldn't have used my own driver's license.
Why?
Because on Friday, we didn't have an intention to kill my parents. And if we buy the guns and I have my ID and I put my address, then paperwork's going to show up at the house. My parents are going to know I went and bought guns on Friday. We were trying to conceal that.
Okay, had you bought guns before?
No,
How do you know paperwork would show up at the house?
I'm just assuming that brochures, whatever, will show up at the house.
Okay, so you go back home and you see the interaction between your parents and they go in the den. Was it your idea then? Or Lyle's? Who first acted in terms of the violence?
Lyle came to the top of the stairs after my dad had ordered me to my room and said he was coming up, and said it's happening now. But my focus was, Dad's coming to my room. I can't let Dad come to my room. And Lyle said, you understand, it's happening now, and I knew what that meant. And we were about to die now. And I told him my gun's in my room, and I ran to my room to get the gun. All I knew is that I got to get to that den. Fear was driving me to that den, and rage. The idea that Dad was going to come to my room, Dad was going to come to my room and rape me that night. That was going to happen, one way or another. If he was alive, or then that was going to happen. And so I went and I ran and I got the gun in my room and I went down to the car and I loaded it and I ran into that den before Lyle could, without a discussion, before Lyle. I didn't even wait for Lyle. I knew I had to get to that den.
Okay, but again, from an outside objective, I get it, not thinking straight, you had the trauma, all of that, but you do see that there were other choices at that point.
I get that, looking back as a healthy individual today, that there were obviously other choices. When I look back at the 18-year-old that I was, and I don't mean to minimize it by saying I was 18, just the person I was then, and what I believed about the world and my parents, running away was inconceivable. Running away meant death. That was never going to happen. It wouldn't matter where I was. My father sent me on tennis trips when I was 12. He didn't think that I was going to tell anybody or run away. He had no fear of that. He had trained me to believe that running away meant death. I knew it. And so at that car, it's logical. I get it. I'm at the car. Why didn't I get in the car and drive away? I understand that question.
And you had a shotgun.
Right. It was inconceivable to run away. You would have to live my experience to understand that there was no way I was running away. And if my dad exited that den before I got to that den, I was dead. She was his victim. She was definitely his victim. And a lot of what she did in blaming me was to avoid her getting hit. When my dad would beat my mom and I would see blood on the sheets the next morning, I knew it was because of me. He was beating her because I failed. She was his victim.
You wrote about all that too. Again, I'm not trying to have you revisit it. I'm trying to figure out that night why, if you knew that this was happening to your mom, I get the betrayal that she knew, and you thought you were protecting her by not telling her, but she knew. Still, if you have this burning hatred towards your dad, you had no thought about rescuing your mom at all?
A series of incidents told me that my mom would not just not take our side, but egg him on. When I found one of my mom's suicide notes, and I called my brother and said, "Mom's going to commit suicide. We need to do something." My brother had gone to my mom. This was a few years before, and said, "Leave Dad. We'll leave with you. We'll go back to New Jersey." And my mom said, "I'm never leaving your father. Your father is a great man, and I'm his wife, and that's who I am." Through step by step, my mother had shown that she was united with my dad, but I still didn't believe she knew. And when I found out that she knew, I no longer saw him and her as different. They were different. She was his victim. I should have known that. I should have separated it in my mind. But at that night, I saw them as one person. Had she not been in the room, maybe it would have been different. It would have been different.
But wait a minute. I'm going to ask you about that, because when you shot him the first time, she was still alive. You had to go out and reload to kill her.
Yes. All I heard was a no, and I ran out. That's the part of this that is the hardest, and you're right. I wish to God I did not do that.
Well, so after the murders, are you doing okay? You need a break?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Oh, you're not fine. No one would be fine after discussing this. Take some deep breaths. Like I said, don't hold your breath. I don't want you passing out in there. So, after the murders, and I've read what you wrote, it wasn't immediate, but then you realized police weren't coming and you were going to figure out a way to cover it up, right?
Yes.
So, did it ever occur to you that maybe you're putting other people in danger by just disposing of guns?
Not at that time, no.
Where'd you dump them?
Off of Mulholland Highway.
Okay. Chance anybody could find them, right?
Yes.
What about, and this, I know I've read both briefs, but what about the money afterwards and the spending sprees?
It's shameful.
I mean, why do you think that was?
You know, I was torn between hatred of myself over what I did and wishing that I could undo it, and trying to live out my life making teenager decisions, and I bought a Rolex. Buying a Rolex, which is just an incredibly callous act, made me to make myself feel more like a man. To say, okay, I'm a man now, as if that's going to make me a man. Buying a suit. I had never stolen like that before, but I was raised in a family where stealing isn't what was frowned upon. It was
Getting caught.
getting caught was what was frowned upon. My father prided himself on being able to do anything inside or outside the law and rise above it and profit from it. I was not raised with a moral foundation. To say the opposite, I was raised purposely without the moral foundation that I should not do wrong when I know the difference between right and wrong. I was raised to lie, to cheat, to steal. Steal in a sense, an abstract way. So when I was playing tennis, my father would make sure that I cheated at certain times if he told me to. The idea that there's a right and wrong that I do not cross because it's just a moral bound was not instilled in me as a teenager.
So when do you think you learned that?
That's been an evolution for me in life. When it came to the burglaries, 10 years later, my wife owned a store called Planet Puppy, and her store.
She was burgled. You wrote about it.
Yes, and that had a major impact on me. But I was already going along the lines that there is right and wrong. I had begun to believe in God again, and I understood the moral right and wrong. The evolution of me having an internal guardrail that there's just certain things that you don't do has been an evolving process. It's been that my journey in prison has been that process, me finding who I am.
And the reason I'm asking you this about who you were at the time is because you wrote at length about what you felt your character defects were at that time, right?
Yes.
And do you remember what you wrote?
I wrote it. My character defects involved a lot of moral failings.
I have it listed.
I was dishonest. I was angry. I was in a codependent relationship with my brother. I was impulsive. I was entitled. I had extreme negative talking to myself. I would violate the rules if I believed that it would benefit me. I did not trust authority. I didn't trust my relatives. I lived in an isolated household. We were trained to not go outside the household. So I had deep character failings.
Okay. But I'm talking about, and these were, you recognize now, these were instilled even before the murders.
Absolutely, yes.
I don't know that what would have occurred if he had tried to stop you or if he had not gone along with it, but we both know that, and you wrote about it extensively, about the codependent relationship between the two of you. And I know your counsel took you through all the healthy boundaries you have at this time, but even that statement about him using cell phones, so you thought it was okay. You're a 50-year-old man at that point. And, you know, I don't know if you still knew you had the one in November. I didn't ask you that question, but it's problematic to me that you would see that as some kind of tacit permission, and that's problematic. I think you do need to find that independence, and I think that you talk about him being a strong accountability partner in all these other ways, but then again, look at the contradiction. Hard for us to see that when he's condoning this behavior and vice versa. So that was similar to what you exhibited at the time of the crime as well. So at this time, we believe the aggravating factors in terms of institutional adjustment and lack of offender change and the weight that we are giving, although it's minimal, to the static factors outweigh the factors in mitigation. But we have given all the mitigating factors consideration and weight, and I think that is a lot of the reason why this is a 3-year denial. I can just tell you that oftentimes when we have people with a pattern of rule violations, cell phones, as recent as yours, could easily and routinely would be a 5-year denial. But every case is different. Every case is individual. And I think you've mitigated a lot of that today by coming in and being candid. Under Marcy's law, we're required to consider a 10 or 15-year denial, but we find by clear and convincing evidence that's not warranted. As stated at the beginning, we gave great weight to your youth offender status. At 18, you'd been subjected to abusive environment that was dysfunctional. You had no control over it. You were immature, impulsive in many respects, influenced by negative peers, your older brother's willingness to commit the crime. You didn't weigh consequences. You didn't make good choices. Your actions and decisions in many respects showed impetuous thinking, heedless risk-taking. You didn't properly assess the resulting harm of your actions. You lacked the neurological and emotional maturity of an older person. You were not deterred by your prior contact with the justice system due to the burglaries. All of these hallmark features of youth are mitigating of your behavior at the time of the crime and when you first came to prison. And we gave that great weight. But as I said, this decision has more to do with your behavior after your 26th birthday. And indeed, your entrenched criminal thinking and actions well beyond your 26th birthday and up to last year show a lack of growth and maturity, at least in those areas, such that we couldn't give as much weight to growth and maturity as we would have liked. Two things can be true, and I'll use your phrase again. You can grow and mature in some ways, but have a lot of blind spots in other areas. It's true of all of us. You know, we can find ourselves progressing in a certain area, but neglecting some other area. And when it comes to rule violations and criminal thinking, that is critical to you demonstrating that offender change. So while it does mitigate your static factors greatly, it has less mitigation on your institutional adjustment and true offender change. We also gave special consideration to your age, your length of confinement, and your physical condition. We recognize that violence decreases after the age of 50. You're now 54. We recognize you haven't been violent for 11 years in prison. We also recognize that you've served 35 years in prison. All of those things were given special consideration and also carried weight as far as clear and convincing evidence that 15 or 10 years is not warranted. I'm not going to put on the record what your physical ailments are. I know what they are, and we did consider those. And while I understand, and I don't have to say why, but I understand they can be debilitating. We also recognize that you've treated and managed, the initial problem with Crohn's for many years, kidney issues more recently, we recognize. And yet still, as you talked about, you're capable of playing pickleball and doing other physical activities. You're certainly not physically infirm. Nevertheless, we did give that special consideration, as I said, and we did give it weight and mitigation. But the youth offender factors and elderly consideration are not the only mitigating factors, and so when we looked at our discretion to impose a 3, 5, or 7-year denial, in determining the appropriate length, we looked at all the other mitigating factors as well. And we truly believe you have within you what is necessary to achieve parole.